everybody, and welcome to what I think we'll call the NLSS Dark Souls Roundtable, or Dark Souls 2 Roundtable, because Tuesday marks the release of one of the most hotly anticipated games of the year, Dark Souls 2, and myself, as well as my co-hosts Nick and Josh, say hello.
Hello.
Have had a chance to basically sink our entire weekend lives, I think, into the game right now, and we haven't quite finished it yet, but I think we've got a lot of things to say, and I know a lot of people are going to be hungry for information, so we're going to talk about our impressions. There will be spoilers in this. If you want to keep yourself from getting Dark Souls 2 spoiled, you should probably just, unplug your internet cable now and don't come back until you've beaten the game, but let's get started, shall we? So the very first thing I wanted to ask is, we'll start with Nick here. Why don't you tell a little bit about the experience you've had with the game so far, how much time you've invested in your overall impressions of it so far, so we can let people know how we feel about the game right off the bat.
Oh, wow, that's a big thing you're putting on me. Basically, just describe the whole game. No.
Okay, I didn't ask for any sass. That's the one thing I didn't ask for.
Story.
All right, so Dark Souls 2 is a game that I've basically been involved in for the last, 72 hours, almost nonstop. I've been marathoning the game like it's the only thing that exists in my world, and it's been up and down. There's been some tumultuous times. There's been emotions expressed. I think both of you feel the same way, and I have some mixed feelings about the game, weighing generally toward the positive, but there are some objective negatives I think that we'll probably end up discussing in the video. I think there are some really nice improvements. I think there are some steps backward as well. I don't want to get too specific yet, because obviously we're going to delve into these things in greater detail later.
Good idea.
So, yeah, I think I'll probably just leave it at that for now.
Cool. How about you, Josh?
All right, I have about 26 hours in. I think the last that we talked, I think I'm the farthest, but only by one boss. But on a whole, I love it. I think it's a great game, and I'm a huge fan of Dark Souls 2. It's got some issues and some frustrations that I have towards it, but generally on a whole, very positive.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more on your side as well. I think that anybody who liked Dark Souls is going to really enjoy Dark Souls 2, even though I do agree with Nick as well that there's some quirks, there are some objective improvements, like how awesome is it that there's now a fast movement up ladders button that has actually greatly improved my life.
Yeah, you just blew my mind as well.
You guys didn't know that?
I had no idea.
You can hold the run button and you can sprint up ladders, so if an enemy's trying to chase you up a ladder or smash at you, you can get away.
That's the
this whole time I've been living a lie.
That has been
I've been living life on the edge and I didn't even know.
That's been one of my most important tactical advantages over the enemies, because if I just sprint through an area and they try to hack at my legs, I'm like, see you later.
The only new meta I knew about ladders was that now I jump off them randomly by hitting B twice instead of sliding down.
That's the other thing I was going to say is, whose bright idea was it to make B at the top of the ladder be let go and fall to your death? That, I don't get that.
Josh doesn't have that issue.
I didn't have that experience. Yeah, I was like, well, because I guess I forgot what the button was in the first Dark Souls, because I'm standing on this ladder, I'm holding in B, but and I'm pressing down at the same time, it's I'm not going anywhere. So what's going on with this? Evidently, if you hold in, you have to I don't know. There's some weird way that the B and the down sync.
It's B plus down you slide, and double B jumps off.
Yeah, double B
and
jumps
double B
off.
in the past was slide down.
Yes, exactly. I think what we've mostly learned is that Dark Souls 2 is a lot like Dark Souls 1, with the exceptions of ladders, which they've just thrown out the fucking book and completely rewritten it.
Well, ladders, Estus, humanity, there are a bunch of things, actually.
It's a good segue, actually, but what I just wanted to finish with is that the complaints I have about Dark Souls 2, I was mentioning this in a metaphorical sense to you guys yesterday, but if this was a microscope, they got the coarse knob set exactly right. This is Dark Souls, and it feels like Dark Souls, and it doesn't feel like anything else. There are the fine knob, maybe there's some times where I would have adjusted it a little bit, but it definitely feels like a Dark Souls game, and it's maybe one of the most authentic and true sequels. And I think anybody who was worried about them dumbing down the game or making it more casualized or anything like that, kind of
not at all.
Kind of the
not
opposite.
At all.
So to segue, I have some questions here that people had about Dark Souls 2, and one of the things I wanted to talk about, because obviously the difficulty of the series is one of its hallmarks, is would you say that Dark Souls 2 has the same difficulty and overall gameplay experience as the first one, or would you say that it is easier or more difficult? And this was asked by a number of people, but none of them left names. So why don't you answer that, Josh, on the difficulty of Dark Souls 2?
In general, as a whole, I guess, the area, places that you go all the like the minions and everything, those are basically the status quo of Dark Souls. I haven't had too much of a problem. There's more there's more bad guys, I say.
Yeah.
But there's the way that the game kind of combats that is with more bonfires, I suppose. So it takes less time to get past the enemies, and when you do, there's usually a bonfire just up ahead. For bosses, I've had more time. Because the servers aren't up right now when we've been playing it.
I want to interrupt you for a second and just say that I feel like a great sense of solidarity for everybody that's reviewing this game right now. Because nobody but us will ever, well, people like us that are reviewing it and people without Xbox Live Gold, I guess. Nobody else will never understand what it is like to go through some of these bosses and die 40 times and be
also
like...
people in 10 years when there's no more Xbox Live.
No, Nick, that's never going to happen, man.
Yeah.
Always online. It's right there in the title. Always.
But yes, going through the game, I beat all of Dark Souls. I came through the game twice. I've used summons like the entire time.
Yeah.
Going through this game without summons is very difficult. Having said that, I don't know if that's going to change when more people are going to be around, or if I'm just really bad at the strats. But yeah, it's tough and the same. Yeah, so I don't think it's easier in very many cases, except for the more bonfires. But I think the course is basically the same with the enemies. Most of the time, the bosses are the same. In rare instances, they're more difficult.
All right, yeah. I think I would tend to agree with you on that one, but I would maybe take the approach that I think the game's a little bit harder, but I'm not sure if that's just because I played Dark Souls 1 with the benefit of being able to ask other people for advice if I got stuck, or even being able to look at a walkthrough or something, or summon somebody. But yeah, Nick, why don't you go on your thoughts about Dark Souls 2's difficulty?
Yeah, I agree with you completely on what you just said there, and I think people do have to keep in mind that we're qualifying everything we're saying as coming from a position where we don't have any of those external resources other than each other.
Yeah.
And we don't have anyone to call in to summon. The NPC summons half the time seem to be pretty much garbage, so you can't really depend on them.
More than half.
Okay, so like most of the time. And a lot of the difficulty that we're experiencing may be very well to do with those elements that are missing from our experience that you guys maybe will never have that problem.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes it a little hard to say exactly how hard I feel the game actually is. I guess all I can really say is just from my own perspective, not having those elements, it's pretty goddamn hard.
Yeah.
I've been really frustrated a bunch of times, and I feel like what have I gone through Dark Souls 1? I've 100%ed it. I've probably beaten it 2 or 3 other times beyond that. So I'm very well versed in the essence of how Dark Souls plays out, and I do feel that the game is incredibly hard. There's also the element of what Josh talked about where walking through the general areas to get to the bosses. I feel that they're probably pretty much on par with the last one, but I think that the fact that there's so many bonfires now, and also a huge, huge change, is that after you kill enemies about 10 times, they stop spawning.
Yeah. It's very... I wanted to talk about that a little bit more in depth, because we don't know yet whether that's... I thought it was a glitch the first time it happened. And then, after a while, when it kept happening and enemies started disappearing if I reloaded at a bonfire like 10 times, I thought it was to maybe, make the game easier. It was kind of like, in New Super Mario Brothers or something like that. If you fail a level, they're like, hey, do you want to get Luigi to do it for you? And but you've kind of hypothesized that it's to stop you from just farming enemies and then using that to grind levels, basically.
It could be both, actually. We're not really sure because we haven't heard any real comment on it yet. But yeah, it could be that they want you to stop farming, which would give you an artificial boost to get you ahead, or it could be just to make it actually easier. If you've run the same gauntlet 10 times, you just should have an easier experience then. The problem comes in that doesn't always still matter, because sometimes the bosses are so disproportionately more difficult than the area before it that all it's really doing is saving you the tedium. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I'm really kind of on the fence still with that. But it does sort of change your experience with how you go through the levels, because all of a sudden you now have this new tool that if you really want to, you can clear out the entire area. And I've done this on more than one occasion. I think I'm the only one of the 3 of us that has used that as a bit of a crutch to not only grind, but also just to save myself from tearing my hair out going through the same area over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to ask you how you feel about that too, Josh, but I just wanted to say there's an area called No Man's Wharf, which we've colloquially kind of referred to as
one.
Yeah, pirate town or Viking town, basically. And I probably died trying to make my way to the next gate in that area, basically, maybe like 30 to 40 times the first time I did it. And it was because when you first start out, there's like an enemy drops down behind you, and then as you're trying to cross like this gangplank, there's a big dude that comes after you, and another dude is shooting flame arrows at you at the same time. If you manage to get past that, then there's like 3 more guys that come at you, and then you go up a hill, and there's all sorts of like fire hazards and oil drums and stuff up there. By dying so much, like all of the enemies in that first section of the game are now just permanently gone. So whenever I go back to that area, it's just like la-di-da-di-da. I just like sprint across the gangplank and like go up the stairs, and it's made it a lot easier, and it probably made it feasible for me to beat it. But I also do kind of feel like it's cheapened the experience to some extent. I don't know.
Yeah, there was this feeling of futility in the first one. It's like you have to get better. The game will not bend to your will ever.
Yes.
Now you kind of don't have that anymore. It's really up to you how much time you want to sink into an area.
But
you just clear everything.
I also think the game kind of comes at an angle. We could throw more obscene things at you right now to make your life a living hell. But there is kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I've only had to deal... the first time the disappearing minions happened, I was in the first stage.
Yeah.
And I was going down the ladder, and all the time there would be the one guy on the bridge, and he would come across, and there would be a guy kind of like sleeping in a hump.
Yep.
Or yeah. So that was the first time I noticed, because when they stopped appearing, I was like, well, that's kind of weird. And I was talking to Nick, and yeah, they ended up disappearing. I didn't have to deal with that, I don't think, again.
Wow,
probably
it must be nice.
No.
Jeez.
That was a misquote. I did have to deal with that again when the minions spawn near the bonfire. When minions spawn near the bonfire, they're all I reload until they're all dead forever. I think that's the biggest. That's probably my biggest gripe with it. Having said that, every once in a while when I'm stuck on a boss, I'm on my way to the boss, I will stop and murder all the minions just in case I have to fight this boss enough times that I have to deal with them to like not be there.
Right.
Because they become the obstacle that's getting me from getting to the boss. I can get to the boss without killing them, like probably half the time, but I would much rather them not be there and just keep on heading to the boss and probably just keep on dying and dying and dying. But if that's the course, then I'm gonna take it.
I have one more little thing to say. Sorry, I didn't mean.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Regarding you mentioned that there felt like there were more enemies in general, and do you feel like that sort of throws the rhythm off? Because I feel like if you're thinking back, like go back to Undead Burg, where you're running across that bridge, and then the dude's throwing the pyro stuff down at you, and then there's like the 3 guys in the house on the other side of the bridge. Like you very much develop this sense of flow of how you move through that space correctly to not take damage. But once you start getting enough enemies, you start to end up with this RNG element, which I feel like sort of maybe cheapens the experience, because it's not so much about learning the environment, it's about learning how to react to everything, which, there's a little of that in both elements, but I think that I kind of prefer the former rather than the latter.
I feel like I've played Dark Souls 2 very differently than you guys have, and when you're talking about like there being a lot of enemies, I totally agree with that, and I know what you're saying in Dark Souls 1 as well, because I totally remember the path that I took across the Undeadburg Bridge. You kill the crossbowman, run across the bridge, then there's the 3 dudes in the building, and you just shield and then take your opportunity to attack one, etc., etc. Like, that's ingrained in my head. If you asked me what the strategy is for a mob in Dark Souls 2, there's probably like a 40% chance that I could answer it, because whenever I see like 8 enemies in my brain, that's like, I'm not meant to fight these guys, I'm just going to find a way around them. So as soon as I find a bonfire that's close to the fog wall, I don't fight enemies anymore. So I just sprint from the bonfire to the fog wall, and it's been a strategy that's worked out just fine. Because, I mean, the bosses in the game have not been easy. Many of them have not been easy anyway. But the mobs, that's where probably 75% of my deaths happen, is on the way to a boss fight or like between bonfires that are intermediate on the way to a boss fight. So I've been spending a lot of my time just sprinting around enemies and like practicing getting the invincibility frame properly on my rolls so I can dodge swings of enemies that are more difficult to avoid. And we're basically the same level, so I think it's viable to play the game both of those ways, which is kind of interesting. But I don't know, I feel like I'm on a speed run a lot of the time, because rather than like learning the patterns of enemies, I'm just like, no, we don't need to deal with them. I don't need to deal with these like wizards that are here and shooting these awful spheres that go and hit you in the back.
You're playing it like you would play after you've already completed Dark Souls.
Exactly.
Right. So and that makes sense, and I've also done that as well. I've sprinted 2 bosses, but like I said, if there are basic enemy minions in the way, and I can kill them with 1 to 3 hits, I'll take the time and kill them all just to make sure they're dead. Because if it's a difficult enough boss that I'm really struggling with, I don't want there to be more obstacles in my way to face that boss. It's really only in the instance of if I have to fight a boss, that's the only time my mind will be like, all right, please just defeat all these enemies because it's too much.
I'm interested in knowing...
My completionism won't let me. I can't just let him stand. I have to kill everything, and I have to find every object in every environment. That's the only way I can play.
See, that's crazy. How did you guys handle the room just before the fight with the Rotten? Because that was the one where I was like, if they're gonna sprint from a bonfire to a boss room, it's gonna be this one.
Yeah, okay. I did that.
I didn't. I went around the edges as slowly as possible.
Oh my God.
And I killed all the leeches.
That is crazy.
Well, so I rhythmically made my way down to the bonfire just outside of the door. So I did fight all of the creatures up until that point.
Yeah.
And I smashed up all of the statues as well. But when you get to that bonfire, it's super easy. All you have to do is just drop down and then go to the right. And kind of hug the wall. There's probably 3 vases that you'll have to shatter throughout the whole thing. But that's my way that I took it. So it's just kind of the road of least the road of least resistance.
I got poisoned every time, and I just accepted it as an inevitability.
I don't think I got poisoned once.
I played Dark Souls 2 the same way I played Dark Souls 1, where I'm like, well, gonna get poisoned. So I just used an Estus preemptively, basically, as soon as the poison hit, just to get me to the door. Okay, so it's a good segue, I think. Someone asked a question. Let me find it here. How many of the core mechanics, or what core mechanics, are different in Dark Souls 2 compared to its predecessor? Because it's obviously a sequel and it's a direct sequel, but they actually did change at least a decent amount in some of the fundamental stuff, like Estus in particular, and healing in general, I guess, work kind of differently. So Nick, why don't you go over some of the core mechanics, and if you kind of don't remember all of them, maybe we can help jog your memory, and vice versa when we're talking.
That's fine. I actually have a little text document here that I prepared with many of the changes. So the one main one that I think is the first thing I want to mention is you get fast travel right at the beginning of the game.
Yes.
First bonfire you get, as soon as there's another bonfire you can go to it immediately. There's no getting Lord Vessels. There's no setting up anything like that. You basically can just move right out. And what that means in the larger scope of the game is it changes the structure of how the level design works a little bit, because there's not as much of a reliance on opening shortcuts and looping back around, although that does happen on occasion. A lot of the places seem to sprawl a lot more horizontally out and further away from the hub world, which you'll get to in probably about the first 15 or so minutes of the game.
Yeah.
And you actually spend a lot of your time in that hub world, even though only kind of superficially, because there's a handful of NPCs there, and you need to keep coming back to them, but there's not a lot to do in that area other than them, to be with them. Mm-hmm. So that's, fast travel. I don't know if it's necessarily a better thing or not, but I appreciate it. I just don't know that if it changed the level design so much that it makes it sort of less good.
I'll give you,
if that makes any sense.
I'll give you my opinion on that, because one of the things that's so cool about Dark Souls 1 is the way that all of the worlds kind of interconnect, and how you don't see it when you first get started. But, from Firelink Shrine, you can go to the Catacombs, you can go to Undeadburg, you can go to Undead Parish, there's the area where you can go to get to Frampt later in the game, New Londo Ruins, etc., etc. The whole thing is, all kind of connected and twisted, but just by opening one door, that can, provide a hallway between 2 areas that you didn't even know could possibly exist, which is really neat. And Dark Souls 2 does seem to lose that a little bit. There are areas in the game that we found where that kind of folding does take place, and it feels really clever and nice. But there is also a lot more okay, this is a new area, there's 2 bonfires in this area, there's no way to get between them quickly. I can't get from the door of Pharos to Majula just by running, basically. It would take me forever. So
it's impractical, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it has lost a little bit of its cleverness in the level design. The actual environments, I think we're only about halfway through the game from what I can gather, so I don't necessarily want to say anything, because in Dark Souls 1, if you had judged the environments before you even saw, like, Anor Londo, and you just got out of the depths in Blighttown, it might be a bit premature. Right. But I think it's okay. But yeah,
the way that I kind of felt is that Dark Souls 1 is very vertical.
Yep.
And so you can go to all those different paths. Dark Souls 2, it's more horizontal, so you're kind of like on this journey, and the only way to get back home is by teleporting, because you don't want to journey all the way back home. Who the hell are you, Bilbo Baggins? No, you're the Dark Souls guy. You just use a fire.
It's a long trip.
It is, and I guess it's kind of like when you get to Anor Londo in Dark Souls 1. At that point, you have that ability to fast travel. You don't have to go from Anor Londo in the Shrine of the Princess all the way back to Firelink Shrine when you can just take the fire.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So that's fast travel. What about some other new stuff in the game?
All right, so another big one is we've got the change to the Estus Flask that you mentioned. We don't entirely know how this works with the kindling of bonfires still to this point, which is something we probably shouldn't spend much time on. But
yeah,
there is there's shards now, and there's dust. And the shards basically allow you to have one more Estus at all times permanently. It's just a complete increase, and then the dust is reinforcing your Estus, so you get +1, +2, +3, which basically results in a larger charge per heal.
Yes.
And those are all items that you find scattered through the world, and you find them very rarely, in fact. For the first, 12 hours or so, I had only had, 2 Estus.
That was a major change to how you tackle the game, I think. Because when I started and I only had life gems, I was like, I never want to use a life gem ever. Because life gems are basically potions. You eat them and then they heal you, for people out there who are listening.
Yeah.
But then you get Estus, and you're like, oh, finally, I can start playing this like it's Dark Souls again. And you get 1 Estus. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? You get 1 Estus? And eventually, even we're, like you said, 25 to 30 hours in blind, which is probably 40%, 50% of the way through the game. I have 4 Estus now, and
I have 7.
I have 7.
You guys both have 7. Oh, you're like an area ahead of me. So
6 or 7, I think.
I think I've missed 7. A couple of the shards, but I guess there's maybe 1 or 2 along the path that I'm about to take to follow you guys as well. But yeah, especially that first area, since this is not easy, and like Josh was saying and Nick was confirming, they throw a lot of enemies at you. 1 Estus is really, really difficult to proceed with. But you do get supplemental life gems that you can use to heal yourself, but they're consumables, and once they're gone, they're gone. It's kind of like using a divine blessing or something like that.
Well, they actually had the herbs in Demon Soul, so it's kind of a combination of the 2 systems where you've got both Estus and consumable herbs. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I guess it works. It's just I kind of just really like the way the Estus system worked in the last game, but that's just me personally.
As we get farther in Dark Souls 2, I don't mind it. I think it's only because I got to a level where I'm usually at in Dark Souls 1 in terms of Estus. I have at least 5. That's the status quo in Dark Souls. That's what I should only need to get through the game.
Right. Well, after a point, it actually makes the game easier, because you used to only get 5 per bonfire until you kindled it. Now you start with more than 5 if you have that.
True.
Right.
So we've actually reached a point where we have more Estus than we would.
Well, if you find all the items, I guess. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Mega Man game, or like a Legend of Zelda game, where you'd get heart containers or pieces of heart or something like that. It rewards people who really are meticulous in their research, or meticulous in their exploring. But it doesn't seem so far like they're really hidden out of the way. It seems like they want you to find them, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least a few in the game that are kind of scattered.
There's a couple that have been a little bit hidden.
Okay. What I will say, and I don't know if this experience is true for you guys, but when I die, it's very rarely from being ground down until I've run out of Estus. It's usually been 1 or 2 combos from an enemy.
Yes.
And for a lot of boss fights, just 1 hit is enough to get you.
The Estus probably wouldn't have made a difference. You're right about that, yeah.
Isn't that true for Dark Souls 1 though?
That
do you often find yourself without any Estus?
The animation, I think, goes faster in Dark Souls 1, so
Very
I feel like I could get it in a lot more often during boss fights than I can in this one, where it feels kind of arduous every time I need to heal.
I mean, in Dark Souls 1, I often do find myself in situations where I'm like, okay, I'm out of Estus, but I could win, so I'll pop a humanity, even though that's kind of it's a valuable resource. I'll pop it anyway.
For the segue.
Yeah, that actually is a great segue. Let's talk about humanity, because I mean, it's something. It's one of those things that we're going to learn about, especially next week when the servers go online and we can actually see how this game handles humanity and covenants and stuff like that. But the way that humanity works, for people that are not familiar, in Dark Souls 2, at least from what we can tell so far, is that it's not called humanity anymore. It's called human effigy, but it's basically exactly the same thing. But when you pop it, you automatically become human, and you don't need to rest at a bonfire to restore your humanity. So you can be like at a boss wall and know that a summon sign is going to be there, pop your humanity, and then the summon sign will just appear on the ground, and you can summon the AI or your teammate and go about it. But also, becoming human is one way that you counteract something that happens in the game, where basically every time you die, you lose like 2% of your max HP bar, and the only way to restore it to maximum is by popping humanities intermittently to kind of push the bar back up. Josh, why don't you talk about your experience with that so far? Because you were asking me about that yesterday, how I feel about the HP bar coming down.
Okay, the HP, it caught me by surprise. I didn't realize that was in the game until I died a bunch of times, and I realized that I'm getting hit like for a lot more damage than what I was, until I looked at the top, and there's like this little kind of bar that just blocks off half of your part of your overall health. And without certain items in the game, that bar will eventually go to half. And once you're at half, you have to pop humanity to unlock the full bar again.
Yeah.
It's kind of a pain in the butt. I don't really like it, but it turns into not so much of a pain as you progress on through the game and you get those particular items that I have right now. Humanity doesn't heal you anymore as well.
Yes.
So in desperate situations in Dark Souls 1, it would be fine to just pop your humanity and you'd be all well and good again. Maybe that's kind of like the difference between these two games. When you could do it on the fly, you don't exactly get to heal up afterwards. And the last thing, you can burn humanity now at bonfires.
Have you done that?
I don't think we can do it yet, because in the flavor text it says, and I believe it says that it severs the link between worlds, so it makes I don't think you can get invaded when you burn a humanity at a bonfire.
Oh, okay.
But you also can't get help when you do it as well, and I think that's how it goes. I'm not quite sure. I know
so you
it
can
really
be human and not invade, or not get invaded.
So. Yeah, but then I don't think you can get summon signs as well. But that's only if you burn it. So I'm not. Again, we're not playing on multiplayer right now, so we kind of have that disadvantage. But humanity, it just works a little bit differently than what it did in Dark Souls 1. I don't know if it's an improvement. I like being able to go human and finding that summon sign.
Yeah.
And I've done that, on multiple occasions to save my butt. But I don't. The health bar that keeps depleting, I'm still on the fence, but I've kind of overcome that right now at 26 hours in. So.
How about you, Nick?
I honestly kind of agree. I don't really understand the gameplay advantage to punishing the player for losing, which seems to run completely contrary to the idea of removing the enemies for losing, or for winning, rather. So it's like you have the game both subsequently getting harder and easier in both directions. And I also think that having the concept of having the humanity not give you health anymore, and also not persist through death in a way, because if you lose your souls, there used to be a counter in the corner. There's no counter anymore. If you lose your souls and you lose your humanity, it's just gone as soon as you're dead.
Yeah.
And there's a finite amount of human effigy that, as far as I know, you can get. Maybe later in the game you can buy it from someone. But for now, if you get yourself stuck in a position where you're completely out of human effigy, and they give you enough that it's not necessarily likely to happen.
Yeah, especially if you murder the firekeepers at the start of the game.
Right.
I can't believe you did that. I've gone back to that place so many times.
Whenever I get stuck and I can't beat a boss, it's time to murder NPCs, because I'm like, they're gonna drop something that I could use. So
speaking of which,
yes,
I'll talk about this a little bit later because you're on your tangent. But there is something that they do for you that's different from Dark Souls 1.
Oh, you can just say it.
Oh, well, okay. You could basically reset your stats.
Yes.
And I know that you guys didn't do that, but I totally did. We got to a point where I needed a shield that had 100% block because I was sick and tired of this stupid boss. But I needed 30 strength to get it. I didn't want to level up like 3 more times to do so because it was getting expensive. So I decided to go back to the first lady. I gave her one of the items that I had, the only item I had that does this, and respec my stats so I can just have that shield immediately. and it's really nice.
I think something that's very different in Dark Souls 2 than Dark Souls 1 is that getting that 100% block shield was like a mid-game kind of thing. You required 30 strength to use it, which is the same strength that's required to use like some of these strength-based heavy weapons in Dark Souls 1. And before that, you're using shields that have like 80 to 95% physical block, and unless you're amazing at dodging, that is basically inadequate to take out some of the bosses.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could get a shield with 100% physical in the first 10 minutes of the Dark Souls 1.
Yeah.
In this one, it takes you hours and hours.
Yeah, which is, again, good but bad. One thing I wanted to talk about is that, from my perspective, this seems like it's been a really, really boss-heavy game. Like, I almost feel like I'm playing a boss rush game at times. If I think back, if we're roughly halfway through the game and we compare that to Dark Souls 1, that's what boss is. You have the Asylum Demon, or whatever the demon is called in the tutorial, Taurus Demon, Capra, Bell Gargoyles, Gaping Dragon probably, and Quelaag, and maybe the Iron Golem. And that's basically it, right? I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Like the rat boss.
Boss.
That's like there's just like a giant rat. It's just basically a scaled
rat
up
has a
version of
health
the rat
bar.
model.
I think that would classify as a boss.
Oh,
in
it's
Dark
in
Souls 2.
the
boss.
depths. I don't go to the depths anymore.
Well, if we're gonna go call everything bosses, I guess butchers then, because there's like 2 butchers that come.
Do
from the
no?
ceiling.
Do the butchers have a health bar?
Yes.
Well,
I mean, they don't have one that shows up at the bottom of the screen. Anyway, it doesn't matter, okay?
Tangent City.
If we're roughly halfway through Dark Souls 2, I don't know, we've fought maybe, it feels like 15 bosses.
Yeah, I've got a lot of
right.
boss
You
souls.
count up
in
the
my
souls.
inventory.
I kind of just want to, I kind of want to take
Moonlight
inventory
Butterfly.
here.
We forgot Moonlight Butterfly.
Oh, well, you can do Moonlight Butterfly when you please. I mean, we've done a lot of optional bosses, but, okay, just going off the top of my head, there was the Giant, Dragon Rider, the
Close your ears.
well, this is obviously...
I know,
obviously
super spoily, but like this is the most spoilery.
Okay, I won't say it, but there's several. I feel like I fought more bosses than I fought in Dark Souls 1 total by this point in the game, which is great because, the bosses are some of the coolest parts, even though a lot of them, the strategies for them kind of seem repetitive. But, I mean, we were talking about this, we're like, well, it seems like almost every boss, you just get up in its face and then block and then hack them.
Yeah,
but then
in a
I'm
circle.
Like, if you're like, we'll run around in a circle, which is the same way you beat, like, a lot of bosses in Dark Souls 1. But then I was thinking, I'm like, maybe that's an unfair criticism, because you're just a dude with a shield and a sword. What are you supposed to do? Like, stand on the other side of the map and, I don't know, like, hack chains or something until a chandelier falls on them?
Yeah.
Well, no, but the pattern specifically, though, it's always like they hit you 3 times, you block through it, you sometimes roll, and then you try and parry or counterattack.
Yeah, I would
It's
agree
always
with
the
that.
same sort of routine, is what I think we're getting at there.
I think
But even still, is that...
Go ahead.
Pardon me if I'm wrong, but is that not what we do in Dark Souls 1?
I think it is, to some extent. Like,
There's a variation in size, though, with the enemies. I think in Dark Souls 2, they all seem to be toweringly large over you, and they all have massive hitboxes.
it's hard
In Dark
to,
Souls 1, there's a variance more.
It's hard to compare as well because, we've beaten the bosses one time, right? So
Yes, true.
when I think back on Dark Souls 1, I'm like, well, there's variation in bosses, because when Taurus shows up, you put gold pine resin on and just hack the bejesus out of him, and then be super aggressive, and that's rewarded. And then, for Quelaag, you want to hang out around the right side, just by the legs a little bit, and but it's totally imaginable that if I didn't know those strategies, I would just be like, just get in their face, fight them like 8 times, and eventually brute forcing it will work, like it is in Dark Souls 2. So I don't know. But I will say it seems like there's a greater concentration of bosses in the game.
I have a number
of
bosses that I fought. Do we want to reveal that?
Yes, please. Is this just from Souls?
Yeah, this is from counting all the souls that I have.
Okay.
16.
Okay.
And you've done all the optional ones that I have, I think, too. So, yeah, I think that's about what I should have.
I think I have all the optional ones that you have.
Yeah, no, this is a complaint you could offer about Dark Souls 1, or a positive about Dark Souls 1 as well, but a lot of the optional bosses I couldn't find until you told me where they were, and then by that point I was so over-leveled that I just, held my shield up, they would do a 3-hit combo, and then I would two-hand my weapon and basically take them down in 1 or 2 combos, so I don't know. I actually prefer the kind of the focus on bosses as opposed to the levels, but when you get stuck on a boss, it does make it really, really frustrating.
Oh, and there are frustrating bosses.
Yes.
Like, each of us have gone through hell it seems.
I think we've all rage quit at least a couple of times. Where we've just been like, not smashing the controller, but basically just being like, can't do it. Got to come back later.
Yeah. Last night was my worst one, though, with the one that we were talking. Oh, my God. I just couldn't do it anymore. It was also like I was staying up until 9 a.m. in the morning playing Dark Souls. Just completely ridiculous.
I woke up this morning. I went on Skype, and I was just kind of like, I like, because we play this game in shifts. So, like, you guys are the night shift. I go in early. And like I'll catch up on what you guys were talking about the previous night, and I'll go in the morning. I'll do my thing. And like this morning, I was kind of like going through whatever, and Nick just said something. I was like, "Oh my God, Nick, are you still up?"
I was just raging to myself. I didn't even expect Josh to be there. I just wanted to leave this little nugget of anger for later, so I could reflect on the time. Oh my God.
Anyway, there was one more thing I wanted to mention. I will just take the opportunity to say though, even though we've brought up a lot of kind of minor to middling concerns. The fact that I think we've all kind of found ourselves sunk into this game is a testament to the fact that it's really good, I think. I don't know if people are going to prefer Dark Souls 1 to Dark Souls 2. I think it's a little premature because, people are very familiar with Dark Souls 1, and I think the people that really love Dark Souls are very particular in their tastes. So I think it'll take a while for like nostalgia to give way to like honest impressions, and we're guilty of that too. I'm sure we will be when we look back in 2 months. We're probably going to have at least slightly different opinions on this game, especially since we haven't quite beaten it yet.
Once we beat it, even I think things are going to change pretty drastically.
Yeah. People are getting mad at me, by the way. They're like, "Well, how can you talk about the game when you haven't beaten it?" I'm like, "We got it on Thursday. It's impossible. You can't do it." And
I've devoted every possible hour that my body will allow me to playing the game. Like, I have not done anything other than eat, record one video other than that a day, and play Dark Souls. That's all I've done.
Yeah, we've invested like our whole weekend into playing this game. Eventually, people will beat it in 5 hours or 1 hour, the same way people beat Dark Souls 1 right now. But my first trip through Dark Souls 1 was like 60 hours, and this feels like that could reasonably be a good estimation if you're not looking at strategies and walkthroughs and stuff like that, which we can't, unfortunately.
No. It's a tough game.
I seriously had one more thing. Oh, okay, and this is the weirdest negative to end it on, but I really would have loved if they had actually fixed the UI. I feel like I'm still like working against the UI so much and being like, I can't figure out how. First off, if I get an item, it's gonna take me 10 minutes to find it in my inventory.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my own fault for not putting things in like the item box.
Sorting. You can sort things now though.
Oh, I didn't know you could sort actually.
Yeah, if you hit Y, you can actually sort.
Okay. That's actually really useful. But
the item box would be useful too, but I don't use that either.
Exactly.
I use it.
I'm too lazy. But yeah,
But
I
if you
knew
put
you
stuff
would
in it,
use
you can't
Nick.
check it.
But when I get an item, I'm just like, okay, well, half the time it sounds exactly like another item. Like, is it the fire ember? Is it the great seed of fire?
There's a ton of items. There's so many items.
Seed of the tree of giants, fragrant branch of the tree of giants, and just like
crimson water, red water. There's so many different waters and various little potions and elixirs, and they all fill up your damn inventory.
Exactly. So the sprawlingness of the inventory, combined with the fact that still, when I look at a weapon, I'm just like, I can barely see how this affects my attack. And sometimes you can't see what stats you need to wield it. I know you disagree with that, but I struggle.
There's only
with
one screen that you can see the difference in, and I can't find it every time.
I still think
okay.
it's stupid that they use. Stupid is not the right idea. Obviously, very talented people made this game, but I think it's unideal that instead of just saying like if you need 20 strength to wield something, it doesn't say like STR20. Instead, it's just like an icon of like a bicep, and I'm like, that could be. I'm going to assume that that's strength, but and then like you need 14 dex. Dex is just a hand. What is that? How does that convey dexterity? Strength is actually like an iconic one, but if it just said like Dex 18. Strength 20. I would be so much happier.
And then there's pictures of like a human body with various arrows going to and from it. I'm like, I don't know what you're showing me in this tiny little icon, man. Can we say though, one positive is that they allow you to use multiple items at once now, which is a huge thing.
Yeah, very important. So if you have like 20 soul of a Lost Undead, you can just crank that slider basically up to 20 and use them all at once.
Just hit right or left even and go to all or none and then go in increments of 10. It's like, oh my god, somebody thought about the UI for a minute.
Very smart idea.
Yeah, the only way to compare your weapon stats that you currently have equipped to all the other ones you have in your inventories go to the equip screen, not the actual item or not the inventory screen. And you also can't do it when you're when you're buying weapons, so you don't actually know if it's better or worse than what you have. Which I agree with you.
That is insane.
I had a situation.
How can you do that?
One of the paths that you take in Dark Souls 1, obviously, for upgrades is like use your boss souls to make something amazing, right? Like Quelaag's Fury Sword or something like that. I finally found a blacksmith that allowed me to do that, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to give you, like, this sweet boss soul, and you're going to give me this amazing weapon. I don't want to necessarily spoil what it is, but, so I did it, and then I equipped the weapon, and I was like, oh, this is badass. I didn't have the strength necessary to wield it, so I had to two-hand it to use it effectively, and then I went and I was like, I'm going to attack this enemy and, like, one-shot them, it's going to be great, and it did, like, 30% of the damage of my other weapon, and I was like... That was the soul. Like, that was the boss soul. I could have used that to actually level myself up, but instead...
Well, you could still upgrade it, though, and it might have had a resistance issue with whatever you hit. So there's still options.
I don't think so. I know what you're saying. So. It could happen.
I'm excited for when people start min-maxing the items. Like, I'm not a big min-maxer, but I like to know what this thing is capable of eventually.
That's where I feel like I'm at in Dark Souls 2 right now. Is like, I can't wait for more dedicated players and like a lot of more dedicated players to get their hands on this, so that in like a few days, if you have a trouble with a boss, you can just go on the internet. And then I'm not saying you should spoil the experience for yourself at all, but you can just go on and be like, oh, this boss has a resistance to like what I'm attacking it with, and you should attack with like a bleed weapon or like a thrust weapon or something like that instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff is going to happen so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I picked up like one of the first swords I found. I was like, all right, bastard sword, you and me to the end. And that's it. It's just
you're still using that?
Yeah, it's +9 or something like that.
I'm using a broadsword +10, which is silly because it's like we're halfway through the game and I still don't have a good weapon.
Yeah, I'm even lamer in that I used the fire axe, like the pyromancer's axe that I just found, and I was like, I know what this moveset is. So I stuck with that until like level 4, and then I was fighting one boss. I think I was fighting, it was the boss at the bottom of Sinner's Rise, just so you guys know.
Okay, yep.
And I attacked him once, and I was like, oh, that's like literally 1%. So I'm going to have to hit him 100 times to kill him.
Yep.
So now I'm using the like Great Club +8, which is great because it's just a big tree trunk. And like in Dark Souls 1, I now have to run around naked because otherwise my equipment load would be too high. So it's just my lady, who obviously already looks crazy, with orange hair and like a big red tattoo on her face.
That's sweet.
And green skin. And
speaking of, have you noticed, like have you noticed a discernible difference in how fast you roll at different percentages?
Yes, but not to the extent in that I would in Dark Souls 1. Like,
right. Okay.
I don't know if there's like...
Is it more of a gradation? There's not like increments quite as frequently?
I think you're right, and I think that's also because it's tied into one of the attributes that you can upgrade. Like, agility, I think, increases the amount of... the speed of your roll and the amount of invincibility frames you have in that roll. So I think it might be on more of like a gradient.
Okay.
There is a fat roll.
Right, there's a fat roll and like a normal
there.
roll, but so what you're saying is the normal roll just goes at different speeds depending on.
I think there is a point, like a threshold, where it crosses into fat rolling.
It's
not the
70.
same as it is in Dark Souls 1, I think, because I was able to have like 68 or something percent equipment load, and then still be able to fast roll.
Right.
What's messed up, and it's good maybe, but also frustrating coming from Dark Souls 1, is that you can't just put all your points in endurance and get equipment load and stamina. Now they've like separated
one or the other.
Yeah, vitality and endurance for those.
Yeah. So instead of like having 3 go-to things like vitality, or instead of having 2, vitality, endurance, you also now my 3 go-to vitality, endurance, and whatever my equipment load.
I have 4 actually. I have like vitality, endurance, vigor, and strength.
Oh, you put strength in there?
Yeah, because I'm trying to get to 40 for this one weapon, and the club scales at like level A or B for with
club
strength.
Scales, nice.
It is,
what is it? I've noticed the letters at the bottom, like A and B.
Yeah,
what does that mean?
That means like for that stat, as that stat upgrades, you'll get like a damage bonus to that weapon. And the higher it is, like if it's an A, then it scales, like it gets proportionally more damage than it would if it was like a D or something like that. It's a terrible way to explain it, but
I understand. I should look into that.
Yeah.
I have one more criticism about the UI and also new system to mention. Leveling no longer happens at bonfires. It happens at one NPC for as far as we can tell for like most of the game.
Yeah, I think that's kind of lame as well.
And that NPC always has the same 4 lines of dialogue to tell you every single time you talk to her for like half the game. So for like 20 hours, she's been telling me the same thing. With a couple of exceptions.
Every once in a while, she'll say, "Oh, is that a shard?"
Yeah, is that a shard? Okay, that's the other thing she says. And then if you get a great soul, that's the other thing she says. So 3 things.
She should just say, like, if you don't have either of those items, she's just like, okay, what do you want? Like, where do you want to put your points?
Well, why do we need to do anything? Let's just click on her, open the box immediately.
Instead, she's like thousands of years ago, and no, I just want to put 2 more points into strength so I don't lose these souls anyway.
Yeah.
What I think is kind of bullshit about that is that, I mean, I guess I could understand a reasoning for making a central level up place, but in Dark Souls, the original, you just level up at a bonfire. This doesn't really change it except to add an extra loading time, because now when I want to level up, I just sit at the bonfire, fast travel back to the hub world, level up, and then fast travel back to the bonfire that I wanted to be at in the first place.
So now, you've just added about a minute of staring at a screen for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, why did we need to do that
That'll
at all?
give me some flavor text about a sword that I probably won't even find.
I kind of like the flavor text.
You know, it's a really cool... It's got the same...
the best thing they could have done for the loading screen.
It's got the same thing going on that Dark Souls has, which is that the story is hidden, and you have to search for it for yourself, and that's really cool.
It's less hidden, though. No, you don't think so? The NPCs are pretty overt about a lot of things.
They do. There's a lot of exposition.
NPCs.
There's a lot of NPCs, too, yeah.
There's dialogue.
What I will say, though, is that I look forward to seeing Epic Name Bros videos dissecting the lore.
Of course.
Because there's no way I'm going to find everything and read the flavor text on every item.
Yeah, there's so many NPCs, and they all have like their own little story, but they're like not that connected to your story. And I'm not getting too much out of like the back story of like whatever Dark Souls actually is. But I don't know. It seems like the NPCs are in Dark Souls 1, I guess is the easy way to explain it. NPCs all had their own story. If you wanted to find it out, you just kind of found them throughout whenever you were running around. Talk to them as much as you can. This time around, the NPCs seem very much involved in your own story. And even to the point where if you don't talk to the NPCs, you can't proceed on through your own story, as we found.
Yeah, that was bullshit.
That turns into
big
a problem.
objective negative there, but I don't know how much we should describe about that because it's so spoilery.
Yeah, and you know, people are obviously very sensitive about spoilers to the game, so... well, you know, hopefully if you were sensitive about spoilers, you didn't even watch this video in the first place. But I guess that doesn't mean we have an excuse to spoil things.
Talk a lot about gameplay systems, which is valid, I think.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the game here, and I think it's valuable information for people that are, you know, probably waiting on the PC version. I imagine there's a lot of people out there like that who want to get impressions like this, and hopefully, you know, you had something interesting to listen to as well if you're playing Dark Souls 2 right now, and you maybe agree or disagree with us, and you can obviously discuss that in the comments below. But before we leave, any final kind of thoughts on the game, on anything you didn't get a chance to talk about that you'd like to talk about? Let's start with Nick.
I wish you didn't put it at the end because I have some sort of negative things I wanted to say, but maybe I shouldn't.
I think maybe I'll just rapid fire. Go through with it.
All right, there's some like real bad texture work in a lot of the game on the 360 version. Frame rate's been a lot more stable in the last one than the last one, rather. There hasn't been too much of the like huge drop stuff, but there's just some really ugly areas, as well as some very beautiful ones as well. But the artwork just seems rather inconsistent to me, and it kind of makes me sad because one of my favorite things about Dark Souls was the just stunning, epic, massive structures of things. And yeah, they tried to keep that scaling in things, but they also did a lot of work with the way they changed the way the rendering works. Because in the previous one, there was a depth of field effect that was really good at hiding a lot of texture blemishes. In this one, in favor of keeping the frame rate up, they ditched that. And they also added a dynamic lighting system, which has some really jaggy-looking shadows that happen all the time. So in a lot of ways, to tailor things toward making the lighting a bigger portion of the game, which I understand, you know, for plot reasons, makes a lot of sense to have lighting be a thing, because bonfires are, you know, the light that keeps life going and all of that. And, you know, it makes sense, but it aesthetically doesn't look very good to me. There's moments where it looks stunning, but a lot of it has been up and down. And that's why I said I had such, like, middling impressions of the game, a lot of it has been just based on, like, I think the art is kind of iffy sometimes. But when it's good, it's really good. Just when it's bad, it's really bad.
I think it's definitely fair to say that Dark Souls 2 is a game that makes the 360 look its age a lot of the time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is old-ass hardware. We're talking about 2006.
I mean, the last game I played on 360, and I know this because I'm playing Dark Souls 2 on the 360, so I had to open up the disc tray, which automatically made me feel like I was 14 again, was Splinter Cell Blacklist last May, and I played it for like 10 minutes, and then I was just like, can I have a PC code instead? Because this doesn't look good. And Dark Souls 2, I think it has a benefit of kind of being visually interesting, but a lot of when it's not visually interesting, the actual technical limitations show pretty apparently.
Yeah, and I need to qualify again, this is on a 360 version. This may not be a constraint that we experience on PC. I am well aware that this hardware is super old and that it's amazing they've done what they've done with it. That said, what I'm talking about specifically is when tiles on textures are happening like every freaking foot or so, where you see the same texture repeated. It's very likely because of the RAM.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I just wanted to let that be known. I'm not criticizing that they're bad artists or something. I just think it's a severe technical limitation that maybe they should have done other things to work around. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with that. How do you feel about Dark Souls 2 overall, though, if you're comfortable making a generalization like that before completing the game?
I kind of would just say that I would like to finish the game to really say anything, super cemented in. But, I like it.
Cool.
I want to just finish it.
How about you, Josh?
I'll give just my overall impressions. I think we kind of discussed a lot of like the things that I liked and didn't like, or the things that are different. Which I'm for a lot of the changes. I think it's fine. I can understand little graphical things here and there. It's old hardware, so that's fine. I love it. I'm having a great time. I can't wait to continue on. It's frustrating at times. I've went the wrong way multiple times.
Yeah.
I've got lost a lot. But being able to explore and really explore Dark Souls on my own has been huge for me. Like when I played the first Dark Souls, it was basically on stream, having friends and people just help, or whether it's in the form of summons or just in general, just like telling me where to go, what to do. Doing this on my own is so rewarding. Like I get done with the boss and I feel like a sense of accomplishment. Like I did nothing today, but I did something in Dark Souls 2, and it feels good. And I can't wait to finish it. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this game.
I agree with you. When I beat those 3 bosses in a row yesterday that we were stuck on for so long, I did it all on one humanity. I was human the whole time, and I was just like, I am a god. And then I promptly went to the next new area, and I was like, haven't seen this enemy before. Duh, I'm dead. And I really like Dark Souls 2 so far. I think it's you could not accuse this game, even if you think it's worse than Dark Souls 1, I think. You can't accuse it of being a disingenuous sequel. Like, it is not a game, I think, that From tried to make more casualized or more accessible. It's still got that Dark Souls kind of, it's hard to get into. It's gonna kick your ass, and it doesn't really go through many steps to make the player actually learn how things work. Although the tutorial is a little bit longer. That's what I love about the tutorial is they're not just like press right bumper to attack. You have to run across a little tiny flimsy tree branch to get to the tutorial. Then you pick up your weapon, and they're like, oh, by the way, this is how you attack. It really sets the tone. I died 4 times on the tutorial.
It's hilarious that
Me too.
they'll tell you how to do things across the board. So if your character doesn't start with a shield, it'd be like press LT to block, and you just kind of swing your free hand. It's like, wait, that doesn't block at all. That's not how it works. But yeah, I like the tutorial section. It was pretty neat.
Anyway, that's Dark Souls 2. This is our roundtable. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure to check out, I don't know what kind of coverage you guys are going to have of the game beyond this, but make sure to check out Nick and Josh's channel for further content, Dark Souls 2 specifically or not. Those links will be in the video description below. And of course, make sure to show your support on this video if you enjoyed it and enjoyed our company for the past hour or so. Leave a like, talk about what you thought about our discussion, whether you agreed or disagreed, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like it in the future. As always, thanks for watching, and thanks for joining me, guys.
Of course,
Thanks
thanks
for
for
having
having
us.
us.
And we'll see you next time.
Later.
Later.